Okay, we're going to do section number 3 now in your notes. If you're watching online, you can get to the third section. And this is probably the third most important part of church planting. The first part, of course, is the spiritual. The second part is the team. The third part is location, location, location. And I'm going to tell you, this one is becoming increasingly difficult because there are so many church plants out there, and some of them that aren't there any longer left in such a way where now those tenants do not want to allow church plants to ever go back in there again. And so it's a very difficult part of the process. You probably are underestimating how difficult it is already, but it's very hard to find a great location, and a great location is critical. In fact, that's the little byline. One of the most critical decisions is where to meet. And so we want to talk with you just for a few minutes about finding a great location for your church plant. Let me just say that there's a lot of studies that have been done. I encourage you to go find that research. I encourage you to even find that the specific research that's been done for your geographic area of the world or of the United States, because it does differ from place to place. But there are studies that have been shown how different venues get a different type of response. For instance, there's a marked difference between a high school and an elementary school. There's a marked difference. Now, I have some great friends who have started in elementary schools and did a good job, but for the most part, we've seen some not get nearly the same results as they would if they were able to get a high school. And sometimes you don't have that choice, but I'm just saying it's not just I found a place. It's critical to find the right place. And to start that process, we recommend as much as a year out of the launch itself, because it can be that difficult to actually find. So please, whatever you do, don't wait to the last minute. There's even in America, there's a big difference even between churches that meet in schools versus like hotels. Hotels kind of have one of the lowest success rates, and I think for some of the obvious reasons, and maybe for some things we don't understand. All that said is it's critical. It's critical. It's critical enough for us to put it as the third most important thing on your list. And so we do encourage, I'll just say to you straight up, we do encourage church planters first to think portable, not permanent. We do encourage that because I personally think that you really don't know how it's going to play out. So if you go and commit a large amount of finances to a lease or to something you purchased, you're very stuck with that versus the portability factor gives you a lot of options for growth. And we'll talk about some of those here in just a second. But it's really important. Now, this is a very short section, so we'll get straight to our notes here, and then we'll do a little Q&A. There's a lot on this, but honestly, we've kept this section short because there aren't enough general teachings that will apply for everybody. Every city is going to be a little bit different. And so that's where, for you guys that are watching online, learn these principles, study them yourself, but you may have to work with somebody in the ARC for your particular region, or for maybe even some other pastors and church planters there. Okay. Choosing your location, we encourage you to start with 5 criteria that are really important for you to think through. And the first is the word visibility, visibility. And when I say visibility, I'm not talking about just visibility with your eyes. I'm talking about the city knows where it is. Actually, the school that we started in, it was such a popular high school that they called it the school. That's how it was referred. I mean, it was the school. But physically not visible very much at all. It was actually in a neighborhood among some trees. You know, you couldn't see it, but everybody knew where it was at. So we do think it's important for you to be in a highly visible, recognizable, people know the landmarks, the intersections, because it's just important. Okay, just the visibility factor of it. The second is the accessibility, And what I mean by accessibility, I'm talking about parking and egress, the ability to get in and off that property, because our model too is to not have one large building for one meeting a week. Our model is a multi-service model, and so we're going to encourage you to have a model where you can grow an additional service and be able to move off the entire congregation filled with the people that are coming on at the same time. So the accessibility, the egress, and even the parking. And I say that for this reason. Some people look into storefront type of situations, which are wonderful as far as the building goes itself. But usually, like if you end up in some type of storefront, the parking is very minimal. I mean, we were actually looking at a site to add an additional campus, and the building works perfectly, and they had 48 parking spaces. And our ratio is 2.1 per people per car. So that doesn't even give us, 100 people in a building that we could seat 2,000. So that in itself just took that option off the table, even though we like the building and the location very much. So just don't cheat there. It's one of my personal frustrations too, is with some of my pastor, even some of my pastor friends that build these phenomenal buildings and then can't park them. I mean, it's like, well, we can treat that. Look, it just doesn't work. Okay, so the accessibility deal is really huge. The third word is the word size. Size. The size of the room is extremely important, and you can be too small and you can be too big. You do want to create a critical mass in the room, and it was a real challenge for us because we found a 1,000-seat auditorium was where we began, and I knew it was too big because I thought we'd have around 400. My goal was to have 400 in our launch, and I knew we were going to net about 200 people. And so when you have 400 people in a launch of a church, that's a big launch. That's a good launch. But that's also 600 people that didn't come. But if you put 400 people in a 300-seat auditorium, they were standing room only. See, and so you just got to know those dynamics are important to people's just the feel of what that experience was like. And all of you guys that have been in worship experiences, you know that a room dynamic can either make or break that experience, that worship experience. And that's really important, how all that plays out. So size is critical when you're thinking about it. Don't start in too small and be careful with, of course, being too big. Cost is the fourth factor that you need to consider when you're planning a church, is how much is this building going to cost me? And again, that's why I do encourage you to stray away from a permanent situation, because you have not only the lease price or the purchase price, but then you're probably going to have some type of build out as well. And that's where the money goes really high in some of those situations. So just be really careful about the cost factors. Our encouragement, and we'll teach you this when we teach you about money, which is coming up in your teaching today, and how to raise money and get money and spend money the right way. You'll see in just a moment, we don't encourage buildings to ever exceed more than 35% of your budget. Because if you do, in other words, if you overcommit in the building area, you are limiting the number of people you can bring on staff and the amount of ministry that you can do. So you have to set a ceiling. We have one here, and our ceiling is 35%. In fact, we're so serious about it, we wrote it into our bylaws. Because we didn't want ever overambitious board members or whoever making decisions about buildings that would eventually snuff the life out of the church. And so we're very strict on that principle. And so when you find a location, you should know what your budget is going into a launch. And you can just do the math and say, I've got to find something that fits into this. So if you're even talking with a real estate agent or to someone in the city that's helping you find a location, or if you're renting a location on a Sunday or high school or whatever, you just need to know the cost of that is there. Let me just tell you quickly how ours played out. I actually went to this high school on the recommendation of somebody on my launch team. And when I got there, the principal just said no. I mean, flat out. The meeting lasted less than 5 minutes. He just said, no, we're not interested. And I said, sir, you mind tell me why? He goes, honestly, he says, it's just a hassle. It'd just be a hassle, and we don't need the money, and I have to staff it there on a Sunday, and I just don't want to do that. And I said, fair enough. And so I left. And I thought, well, Lord, you have something else for us. Well, that principal called me at home that night. He found my phone number, called me at home. And he said, first words, God dealt with me. Well, I didn't even know he was a Christian, but I was very grateful at that moment that he was. And he said, God dealt with me. He said, I'm new to Birmingham. I've been here 4 years. He said, and when when I lived in Atlanta before that, and when I was in Atlanta, I was a part of a church plant. And my job on the launch team was to help find the building. And the first place I went, they said yes. He says, and when I got home, God reminded me of that and spoke to me and said, make it easy on this guy. Say yes. He says, so I'm just obeying God, and I want you to come back in tomorrow and let's talk. So I was all fired up. And we went in there the next day, and he was completely different attitude. He was all but prophesying, saying, now here's where we can put this, and children's ministry can be over there, and here we can put the nurseries over here. And I was like, praise the Lord. And then he brought it to the auditorium and says, man, give us 6 months. We'll have this whole thing full. I was like, come on, baby, I'm with you, And he was just all fired up. And then we went to his office to negotiate the cost of the deal. And I'll share this story with you because I want you to learn this principle. And he said, he sat down and he said, well, we need to talk about the arrangement. I said, yes, sir, we do. And he said, and how much is it going to cost? He said, I'll tell you first thing, we're going to write into the contract that it is indefinite. It can be as long as you want it. I said, well, I'm very grateful for that. Thank you. And he says, and how does $150 a Sunday sound? And I knew in my spirit, I felt like it was a test. And I said, well, Dr. Stiles, it sounds like the school is going to lose money. I said, that's not acceptable. And he goes, that's what I was hoping you would say. You're definitely getting it for that amount. And I said, no, sir. He goes, oh, yes. He actually insisted. Are y'all listening to me, everybody? We raised our own rent 5 times. We just go to school and say, look, we have to pay more. This is not fair. And we'd raise our rent. And we'd come back 6 months later, look, our church is growing. We need to pay you guys more. We raised our own rent 5 times. We went into we were in 4 classrooms beginning for nurseries. We were using the lunchroom and gymnasium for children's church, and the choir room at times for the children's church, and of course the fine arts theater for the location. But I mean, every month we left gift certificates. $100 gift certificates to our shopping malls or restaurants for those teachers on their desks, and our janitor that we had that helped us out, that they hired to take care of us. We'd slip him some of that green money. Y'all know what I'm talking about? That folding kind. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. And just blessed him. And just you keep that guy happy for you. Trust me. You want the guy who can clean a toilet, your best friend. That's what I'm trying to tell you. When something gets spilled, you need a friend. When somebody throws up, you need a friend. And so we treated him so well. I'm just saying that all has to be worked into to costs, and just think it through. Make sure you're in a position to do a good job there, but at the same time, not overextend yourself. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. Here's the fifth thing that I wanted you to put on your list, and that is you need to think of it for its potential for growth. The potential for growth, and you've got to put yourself in a position where that building can help you grow. In other words, you got to understand, how many services could I do here, and what's the limitation? What's the maximum use that I can get out of it? We like thinking through at least a campus that can allow you to have up to 3 services. And when I say potential for growth, you may go to some place where they limit the time you can have it, which limits your potential to grow. I'm just saying it's a factor that you need to consider in finding a building. And that's, again, why I would caution you away from leases and owning early when you don't really know the potential of that thing, because we've had church planters. One church planter had no option. They had actually shut down all schools for church planters in the entire city. So it couldn't even be a consideration, and it was because of previous church planters, by the way. But they completely shut it down, and he spent a lot of money to finish out an old car dealership, and it sat 500 people. But in a year, they had 1,500 people, and we're in a 5-year lease and needed to get out of it. And so I'm just saying that he was kind of stuck. So he needed to move out of that place, and he still had this other lease for something that he couldn't use anymore. So just be very careful with that. And let me just add to your notes, too. It's not in your notes, but just wherever you go, bless those people. Take care of that location, okay? Serve it. Leave it in better condition than you got it in. And that's just what the body of Christ needs to do. And it's unfortunate that there are cities that you'll go to that you can't, they won't let church planters in it because of bad experiences they've had in the past. Let it not be us. Let it not be us. There's a lot of options for you out there. Movie theaters are working very well. Schools are obviously working very well. There are community centers that are working very well. Here's my encouragement to you, and that is whatever you do find, go to at least 3 other church planters, to other cities that use that same type of venue and learn how to use it well. In other words, become an expert. If you end up in a movie theater, we could send you easily to a dozen churches that are getting after it. I mean, it's working in a movie theater, and you need to learn the flow. Learn how they dealt with children nursery, how they work the foyers, how they be an expert at that type of venue with whatever venue that you end up with. All right? So here's our critical question, and that is, have I considered all of those possibilities for our locations? You have to be an expert at it. Again, let me say what I said at the very beginning. This is the hardest part. I think it's one of the hardest parts of the whole process. And they get money, team, everything, and they can't find a good location. Please don't wait till the last minute to work on this. All right, you got it?